piano people. In today's tutorial, we're going to be talking about how to make Alberti Bass sound better. At its best, Alberti Bass is going to sound light and beautiful and graceful. But if you don't know how to practice Alberti Bass, what's going to end up happening is that it likely sounds really uneven and clunky, and it's really loud, and it takes away from the beautiful melody that it's meant to accompany. In today's tutorial, I'm going to share 3 steps with you that I want you to take to make your Alberti Bass sound better. And I want you to make sure that you stay tuned to the very end of the video because I'm also going to be sharing 2 practice techniques with you. These 2 practice techniques are going to help you make your Alberti Bass sound smooth and graceful and light. One of these practice techniques I've never talked about here on the channel. Let's dive in. The first thing that you can do to make your Alberti Bass sound better is chord blocking. Now, chord blocking is awesome because not only does it actually help you get things into your muscle memory with the way that you play them on the piano, it also helps you to get things into your cognitive memory with the way that you think about them on the piano. So when it comes to Alberti Bass is always a broken chord. So when you're looking at an Alberti Bass pattern, it's easy to look at it and see individual notes, but chord blocking helps you take those individual notes and chunk them into patterns. So for today's video, we're gonna be using the Mozart K545, his Sonata in C, because we have an Alberti Bass pattern right there in the first few measures of the piece. Now, if you look at this piece, you'll see that we have C, G, E, G, C, G, E, G. And while it would be easy to look at those notes and just think like, oh, okay, well, I'm just playing a C and a G and an E and a G, if we actually clump those notes together, or in other words, block them together, it creates a C major chord. And a C major chord is a lot easier to remember than a bunch of random notes. And this is always the case with Alberti Bass. It's always going to make up some kind of chord. And so chord blocking helps you think of that chord instead of thinking about individual notes. Now, if we look at the first 4 measures of Mozart's Sonata in C, K545, we're going to actually block the notes together to form those entire chords. And so the way that we would practice this is that we'll group together notes of 4. So in this first measure, we're going to take what would normally be played separately as the C, G, E, G, and we're going to play it all together. And then we're going to do that for the second half of the measure as well. And then in measure 2, we have a D, G, F, G. We're going to play that together, and then back to C, G, E, G. Then we have C, A, F, A, and then C, G, E, G, and then B, G, D, G, and then back to C, G, E, G. So you can see how practicing that way not only helps me to get the shape and the feel of those chord changes into my fingers, it also helps me to look at the music and block the notes into groups instead of seeing individual random notes. Our brain is always going to be able to remember patterns better than it is going to be able to remember a million individual notes. Step 2 to being able to play Alberti Bass better is to utilize the rotation of your wrist. Now, oftentimes when people are playing Alberti Bass, they see a lot of individual notes like we talked about in step number 1. And therefore they think about their individual fingers playing individual notes. And this leads to a lot of finger movement and a lack of control. Because whenever you are trying to move your fingers individually, you're going to have a lack of control. Your fingers don't really have like a lot of control individually. It's really the whole entire motion of your arm and your wrist and your shoulders that help you to get the right sound out of the piano. So when it comes to Alberti Bass, if we're thinking about individual notes and trying to move individual fingers, it's going to keep it sounding very clunky, very loud, because you're going to have a lack of control. Oftentimes, people will try to play their Alberti Bass and they'll look like this, where all of the fingers are leaving the keys and there's just a lot of motion in the fingers. And when I play it this way, every time I play a note, I have to find my hand position again. If I can keep my fingers glued to the keys and not let them leave the keys, I'm starting out in a much better position because I've already done half the work. I don't have to find each individual note. Now, this also allows me to utilize the rotation of my wrist. And when I'm doing Alberti Bass, I really want to utilize this motion almost like I'm turning a door handle, okay? And I'm gonna exaggerate it a lot for the sake of the video, but as you practice it, it'll get smaller and smaller. So what it will look like eventually up to tempo is this. And this isn't the Mozart pattern anymore, I just went totally off the music. But that's what it will look like, is this little tiny rotation. of the wrist. And notice that my individual fingers are not moving. So I'm gonna do this slowly so you can see what it looks like. I'm rotating to the left, to the right, to the middle, or to the left again, to the right. Left, right, left, right, left, right, left, right, left, right, left, right. And my fingers aren't even really leaving the keys. They're glued to the keys. And so it allows for that rotation to give me the bulk of the movement that I need. And all of a sudden my sound is very even, it's very light, and it's very controlled because I'm not leaving it up to the individual movements of every single individual key. I'm going to be teaching a free 1-hour training all about sight reading. This training is for you if you want to be able to master the art of sight reading, but you have no idea where to start, or you are practicing your sight reading, but you feel like you're not making as much progress as you want to. Go ahead and register using the link in the description. Even if you can't make the live time, you're gonna get a replay delivered to your inbox. The third step that I want you to take if you want to make Alberti Bass sound better is to keep the weight of your hand where the beat is. And this one sounds a little bit confusing when I say it, but I'm going to show you, don't worry. So when we look at the Alberti Bass pattern in the Mozart, we have 8th notes. And you can see that the C is on beat 1, the E is on beat 2, the C is on beat 3, the E is on beat 4. Now, I also have a lot of repeated Gs, and the Gs are played with my thumb, but the Gs are always coming in on the off beat, meaning they're playing on the and. And so what often happens when students go to play an Alberti Bass pattern is because the thumb is naturally a heavier and a larger finger, it starts to ring out, which makes the entire Alberti Bass pattern sound really uneven and clunky. Let me show you. So if I allow my thumb to have its way, then the thumb is really, really loud. Sounds clunky and it's very uneven, and also I'm accenting, not intentionally, but I'm accenting the off beat, which is going to make it really hard to coordinate with the right hand. And so what I want to do is I want to keep the weight in the bottom part of my hand where my pinky is. Now this is going to be challenging because the pinky is the weakest part of my hand, right? It's the weakest finger and it's the weakest part of my hand. So what I'm going to do is I'm almost going to lean into the bottom note, the note that comes in on the beat. And I'm going to offset by lifting the thumb. So I'm playing the thumb as lightly as possible so that it's not clunking out. So if I'm doing it incorrectly, it will sound like this, and the G clunks out where the thumb is. But if I'm doing it correctly and I'm leaning into the weaker part of my hand where the beat is, it's gonna sound like this. And you'll notice that I actually hold that bottom note down. I like to do a little finger pedal on the bottom note of Alberti Bass because it helps me keep the weight there, and I also love the way that it sounds. So listen, when I keep the weight there and I hold that bottom note and I keep the thumb really light, listen to how it sounds. All of a sudden, it's very even, it's very light, it's very graceful. That was a little bit exaggerated. You wouldn't necessarily hold it that long and you wouldn't bring it out that much. But practicing it in that exaggerated way is going to help you offset the thumb so that the note that is played by the thumb isn't slamming out every time you play it. And when it comes to practicing Alberti Bass, there's 2 things that I want you to do. The first thing that I want you to do is to split up the Alberti Bass into different notes and work on that weight distribution that we just talked about. Okay? And so the best way to do this is to focus, because it's going to take a lot of focus in order to be able to do it correctly, and to think about what beat the notes are on. So you're going to have to count out loud likely, and you're going to have to have a good rhythmic understanding of what's going on in your Alberti Bass pattern. So what I'm going to do first is really exaggerate the beat where the weaker part of my hand is playing. I'm going to play 1, 2, 3, 4 of every single measure, and I'm gonna leave everything else out. I'm just playing the beat and I'm almost slamming it out to exaggerate. So 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. And I'm gonna do that as many times as it takes so that it feels really easy and really comfortable to do that. And then I'm going to do the opposite. I'm going to play just the ands where my thumb is, and I'm going to make it as light and as graceful as possible. So 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and. Notice how light it is. Notice how I'm like kind of pulling the sound out of the bottom of the keys, and I'm keeping it really even and really graceful. This is ultimately how I want the thumb to sound in the Alberti Bass pattern. Now, because I split it up and I exaggerated both of those, I have a much better chance of getting it to sound just like that when I put everything together. So when I go to put it together again, now all of a sudden I know where the beat is and my hand remembers where the beat is. And my hand is much more likely to keep the G nice and light. If you are getting something out of this video, please give it a thumbs up, share it with an adult piano player community, and subscribe to the channel so that you don't miss out on any of the content that's going to help you that I release every single day. I'm going to give you that last practice tip, but also, if you're not already a member of my free Facebook community, go ahead and get your booty on over there. We do weekly performance posts, we host free workshops, free webinars, all sorts of amazing stuff, and there's content in there that I don't release on the YouTube channel. You can join using the link in the description below. The last way that you can practice to make your Alberti bass sound better is to utilize a revolutionary practice method, like practicing in rhythms or flash practice. Now, I have an entire tutorial where I go into detail and show you exactly how to use those revolutionary practice methods, and you can check that out right here.